So it was a day of civic unrest and near martial law in Boston when I found the dead moose. There had been a rolling gun battle in the streets of Cambridge, and the younger Tsarnaev brother was still on the lam. I was working at UMass, and I must have heard dozens of students say into their phones, "Mom, he's not from this UMass." I still had a few pounds of papers to grade, but UMass looked like it was just an unattended backpack away from a total clampdown. So I fled and bolted into the woods as soon as I got home. I took a long ramble, and I wasn't looking forward to walking back through the flooded beaver pond, but it was after sunset, and that was the most direct route home. And that's when I found the moose carcass. I really love that area. I love the ponds, the cliffs, all the animals I see. I even like the power lines themselves. But I've learned to be careful there. It can be dangerous. That's where I went nose to muzzle with a coyote and chest to chest with a duck hunter. It's where a gang of deer hunters from out of town stopped me and asked me if I were on a nature walk and told me to be more careful. And I hate it when hunters tell me to be careful. I hate wearing orange. I won't wear bells. It's the Elmer Fudds and Dick Cheneys who should be careful. That's where I found a pile of stolen American flags. I know where there's a animal grave site and a grow site that gets raided by commandos from helicopters. I know where there's dump sites. Once my neighbor called me. She's the principal of a girls' high school in a prison, to tell me that there was a deer carcass frozen into the pond there. So me and my other neighbor, she's the elementary school secretary, we skied out there to go look at it. And it looked like a burst, bloody bugle on the skin of the pond, with the ice pockmarked by paw prints congregating on it from every direction. Once I found a turkey carcass on the ice, and beside it was its frozen, eviscerated, fist-sized heart rocking in the breeze. And I took a picture of it, and I used that to illustrate the concepts of uncanny and unheimlich for a community college class where I was teaching an Edgar Allan Poe story, and where I caught some hell for it from some easily offended and quick-to-complain students. So I'm cautious when I'm there. The moose carcass was imposing. It was architecturally large. It was out of proportion to the area. I'd never seen anything like it there. I was really excited. I rushed home with squeaking boots and wet socks, hatching plans. That carcass, it was on its side on a boggy sump, and the exposed side had been opened up by scavengers already and mostly skeletalized. The underside was still intact and not yet putrid, and the contents of the rumen smelled a little beery. It didn't have antlers, and I didn't know what had killed it. I don't think it was possible that it was roadkill, and I'm not sure you can kill a moose by accident by shooting it, or shoot a moose by accident, I should say. I hoped it was disease or old age. If it was a predator, then something capable of killing and eating me was nearby. So in the twilight, I rushed back, thinking, What I needed to do next was to find someone to come help me poke it with a stick. And it's interesting how quickly you can sort through your list of friends and arrive at the guy who wants to come see a dead moose and be cool about it. My friend Dale was the obvious answer. So as soon as I got back, I emailed him a photo of it. And he called me on the phone seemingly before I'd ever even pressed send and said he'd be right up. He just had to get home from work, tell his wife, change his clothes, get his dog in his truck, and he'd be right here. So Dale picked me up and we drove out there in his 4x4. I sat in his dog's seat, and Sweetie, his ancient, arthritic, and possibly blind and deaf dog, sat on me. And I rested my feet on his enormous, unliftable toe chain in the seat well. We got out there easily enough, despite the hub-deep, flooded pond. And when we found the carcass again, Dale gently lifted Sweetie out. And while Dale and I discussed the demise of the moose, Sweetie waded out into the swamp and settled herself inside the carcass, lapping at the gore-streaked water. I watched flotillas of ticks, too bloated and fat and round to swim properly, push off the carcass toward her. Sweetie looked blissed out. The three of us were there out of curiosity, but also because I wanted the skull. Dale and I took a look at it. We figured female moose don't have antlers, but this could be a bull that had dropped his already. Dale asked if I had checked for a penis, and I said, yeah, but not carefully. So he hefted up a leg, and we took a look, and then we agreed that if there had been a penis there, we would have seen it, unless it had been eaten off. We unpacked and took inventory. I had trash bags, a flashlight, my hatchet, my pruning shears, my sheath knife, my folding saw. Dale had trash bags, a headlamp, his folding saw, a clasp knife, an axe, a machete, loppers, chains, bear repellent, thick rubber gloves, snacks, and an enormous pair of snowshoes for standing in the swamp, most of which I think are just standard issue from his truck anyway. It was obvious that the axe was the right tool to begin the job. I stopped Dale and said, I think I should do it. And he said, why? For religious reasons? And I said, no, because it's disgusting and I'm going to keep the skull, so I should do it. He reminded me that it was his axe, so I stepped back and he swung and severed the nape. After that, we took turns trying out most of our tools. The tissue was easy, but the hide was tough. And I was making a hash of it with my sheath knife when Dale took over with his big clasp knife, and he made short work of it. Dale told me I needed to sharpen my knife, and I felt like a sidekick. After we'd done our job, we bundled the head home in the trash bags. We tidied up the carcass and smoothed over some of our tracks and went back to my house. There, we decided not to put it on top of my garage or in my cold frame, and instead made a makeshift cage and partially buried it, and then stacked heavy two-man boulders on top of it. That's to keep the big scavengers away, but to let the bugs and the microbes in. That very next day, Dale and I were on a hike with friends that we'd planned weeks ago. Bear Mountain was covered with moose poop. It was everywhere. It was our main topic of conversation. Dale and I kept catching each other's eyes. Moose poop, I should say, looks like milk duds, while deer scat say looks like raisinets. So while Dale and I locked eyes, I was dying to blurt out, "Me and Dale decapitated a moose last night. Maybe even this one." But mixed company and the greater pleasure of keeping it a secret kept me shut up. That next Monday, I was back at school in the classroom, collecting assignments and excuses from my students. The global supply of printer ink had run dry. Laptops had self-radicalized and slunk off to join terror cells. Invisible demons from cyberspace ate emails. It's easier to be lied to when you can look someone in the eye and think about decapitating a moose. A few weeks later, that stack of stones we'd made was torn apart, and I was struggling to rebuild it. And my neighbor must have heard me and came up the back path through the woods. My neighbor's an all-weather nudist, but that day he was wearing a nylon windbreaker and his slit to the hips green jogging shorts, which I think are his driving togs. He asked if I were making a cairn, which he knows I like to do. And I said I was, sort of, but I was rebuilding one that a bear had destroyed to get at a moose head. He said he could smell it. So we crouched down together and looked through the cracks in the rocks at the carpet beetles and the maggots in the eye socket. A few months later, absolutely every bit of that huge carcass was gone. I kept finding the spine and the rib cage in the woods and taking it back and stashing it under a cliff, each time with a few less vertebrae attached. I finally took it home in a pillowcase. I disinterred the head, soaked it a while, cleaned it, and detailed it with my mother's old dental hygienist tools. That's where those tools have been. The head, which was now a skull, wasn't a memento mori to me, and it wasn't an album cover-worthy symbol of morbidity. What was uncanny was how quickly and utterly that huge carcass had been disappeared and not become a ruin like the fieldstone structures in the old mill dams and cellar holes that are all over that area. What was unheimlich about the skull was how bird-like and fragile it was. Its long, slender muzzle and zygomatic arches. What might also be a little bit weird was how careful and tender I'd been with it for so long. Thank you very much.
In the morning, in the backyard, a chair to wonder how life got so small. Could this be all there is? Through the screen door, cups and saucers chirping like birds. Well, she'll be okay. I can get away for a while. 'Cause something's gnawing, it's always nagging. I gotta do something before it's too late.